me be the first to introduce you to the corporate ministry.
It's me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin.
And with those infamous words, the ultimate merger from hell was declared as the ministry and the corporation merged to become the corporate ministry. Hello, everyone. This is Warhawk Beyond 2040, bringing to you another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And April 29th, 1999 marks 25 years ago that history was made when the ministry and the corporation merged to become the corporate ministry in the ultimate merger from hell. And for today's special edition, I'm going to be talking about the success and failures of the corporate ministry from April 1999 to July 1999. So, after weeks of the ministry and the corporation feuding with one another, we would see Shane McMahon essentially take over the corporation, thus firing Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. The Rock would leave the corporation after Backlash 99, and Vince McMahon was pretty much kicked to the curb by Shane McMahon after Vince decided that family was much more important than the corporation. And to see these two heel factions come together as one was just really weird because, as I said earlier, the ministry and the corporation were feuding with one another. Now, all of a sudden, they're working together. And we saw Undertaker and Shane McMahon now working together side by side. The whole thing just didn't make any sense whatsoever. And I have made no secret that I strongly disliked the corporate ministry for many reasons. First of all, it killed The Undertaker's mystique. Undertaker was originally the leader of the whole thing. He worked so hard to build himself up as the ultimate evil, and he was pretty much relegated to background status as nothing more than a hired gun to take out Stone Cold and The Rock. And the whole thing was just all about the McMahon family drama with the ministry and the corporation playing as background players, which was just stupid, in my opinion. So, after the corporate ministry was formed, we would see the corporate ministry feud with Stone Cold and The Rock. We would see them feud against former corporation members Mankind, Test, Big Show, and Ken Shamrock, as well as Vince McMahon himself, which we'll get to that eventually when the time comes. And the whole thing, the corporate ministry as a heel faction, I won't deny they got tremendous heat. There's no question about that. But the whole merger was just stupid. To me, it felt like WWF were just copying what WCW were doing, when NWO Hollywood Black and White and NWO Wolfpack Red and Black, when they merged the two together and they had like over 20 members. To me, that killed the NWO. That was exactly the same thing with the corporate ministry. Too many members, things got overcrowded. Yeah, it was just stupid. Absolutely stupid. I thoroughly hated it. But it wasn't all bad. There were some good things that did come out of this mess. We would see The Undertaker become the number one contender, and he would defeat Stone Cold at Over the Edge to become a three-time WWF champion. Unfortunately, it never gets talked about For one obvious reason, it was the same night that Paul Owen Hart lost his life. We would see Triple H begin his own journey after he screwed DX. We would see him transitioning into the game. He would start to put on a lot of muscle. He would start to grow out a big beard and develop a real mean streak. And he was definitely one of the key players of the corporate ministry. And he was really coming into his own as an in ring performer. We would see the Acolytes win the tag team titles. We would see Midian awarded the European title. So, there were some good things that came out of the corporate ministry. Now, while the corporate ministry was feuding with both Stone Cold and The Rock, Undertaker, who had been referencing a higher power that he was answering to, would finally make his presence known, and we wouldn't have to wait long to find out who the higher power for the corporate ministry really was, as we found out the identity of this mysterious person on the June 7th, 1999 edition of Raw, when the higher power was revealed to be none other than Vince McMahon. Oh boy. Now, this is where things really started to get stupid. Now, Vince McMahon and The Undertaker were at each other's throats when the corporation and the ministry were feuding with each other. And after the corporate ministry was born, the corporate ministry delivered a vicious beatdown to Vince McMahon under the orders of Shane McMahon. And we would see the corporate ministry continuously beat down Vince McMahon virtually every single week. But yet, here we have Vince McMahon in the middle of the ring, declared as the mastermind behind the corporate ministry. Oh my God. I won't deny the whole It's Me Austin was legendary. But once again, it just became all about Vince McMahon, and it just became another rehash of the whole Austin McMahon feud. Because for me, I felt the Austin McMahon feud should have ended at WrestleMania 15 when Stone Cold defeated The Rock and regained the WWF title. That should have been the end of the feud right there. Stone Cold overcame the odds, crushed the corporation, dismantled the boss, spat in the face of authority, and got the gold back and was the man once again. That should have been it. We did not need to see another Austin McMahon feud again. But that's what we got. And, I said earlier that Undertaker was relegated to being nothing more than a hired gun for taking out Stone Cold and The Rock, which I still stand by that. But once Vince McMahon was declared as the higher power and the mastermind behind the corporate ministry, Undertaker was nothing more than the boss's lapdog. And you look at the Undertaker's ministry character. This was someone who was pretty much like the Lord Hades of wrestling, the ruler of the underworld. No one could touch this guy. No one would dare cross him. And the idea of someone controlling this guy was just unthinkable. No one could control The Undertaker. Paul Bearer was an exception because I never looked at it as control. I just looked at the fact that Paul Bearer has the connection to the dark side. That's why Undertaker bows down to Paul Bearer, because he's the only one who has the connection and understands the darkness better than anyone. That's different. Vince McMahon is nothing to do with the dark side. He's the evil boss. I know he's been called the devil himself, which probably is true to a point, but to see Undertaker taking orders from Vince McMahon just pretty much killed his character. I know I said earlier that the whole merging of the Ministry and Corporation killed the Ministry as a faction. Completely agree. And it killed Undertaker's mystique. But I felt that once he was taking orders from Vince McMahon, it just murdered his whole character. It really did. Undertaker, as a dark character, was never ever the same after that. It was just so stupid. And you could really see every single week Undertaker just looked absolutely annoyed. He really looked like he didn't want to be there. And he's even gone as far as to say that the corporate ministry was a low point in his career. He's proud of the ministry, and so he should be, but the corporate ministry, he thoroughly hated it. And he's even said in recent years, even on his recent podcast, that the whole corporate ministry just watered down everything that they were trying to do. And it did. It really did. Because all this faction was, they had nothing in common except one thing: take out Stone Cold. Yes, they were feuding with The Rock, but it was more Stone Cold. They were more going after him. Undertaker was more going after The Rock, but he would eventually reignite his war with Stone Cold. And, you know, Undertaker would retain the WWF title at King of the Ring in a match against The Rock, thanks to Triple H. We would see Triple H and Undertaker start to butt heads, and they would start to fight each other. And, you could clearly see that they were favoring Triple H, Vince and Shane, over the Undertaker. So you could see Undertaker was really starting to lose his grip. He wasn't really the big evil dark figure that he was portrayed at the beginning. He was just another heel wrestler getting slowly kicked to the curb. And we would see the corporate ministry basically falling apart before our very eyes. And it would all come to a massive head at Fully Loaded when Stone Cold defeated Undertaker in an end of an era first blood match where Vince McMahon would be forced to leave WWF forever. Oh boy. And the whole corporate ministry pretty much imploded after Fully Loaded, and Shane McMahon would declare the following month that the corporate ministry was disbanded. Yeah, I weren't shedding any tears when the corporate ministry fell apart. I really wasn't, because, as I said, I didn't like the corporate ministry. It just made no sense, and there was just no need for it. There really wasn't any need for the corporate ministry. The corporation and the ministry were just fine as two separate factions feuding with each other. You could have still had the ministry feud with Stone Cold, and then why couldn't you have the corporation feud with The Rock? That would have been much better, would have made more sense. But no, we put the two together, and yeah, it was just crap. It really was. But I had some favourite moments from this period. I did like the moments where The Undertaker pretty much got in Vince's face and told him off that nobody told him what to do and nobody owns him. That was a good moment. I thought maybe that would be a sign that The Undertaker was ready to turn on the corporate ministry and maybe become a babyface. It didn't happen, unfortunately. But, after the corporate ministry disbanded, Triple H would go on to become the WWF champion and become the biggest heel ever. Undertaker would form a tag team with The Big Show and call themselves the Unholy Alliance with Mideon and Viscera, still staying loyal to The Undertaker. The Acolytes would stay together and later on become the APA and become one of the most beloved teams in the company. We would also see the Big Boss Man feud with Al Snow. Now, here's one thing I need to mention before we go any further. Big Boss Man was in the corporate ministry. Now, a couple of months earlier, he was hanged by Undertaker at WrestleMania 15. And then a couple of months later, they're on the same side. Why would you be on the same team with the guy who tried to murder you at WrestleMania? It was just so stupid, and it made no sense. And then you have the Mean Street Posse, who were Shane McMahon's boys from Greenwich. They were in the corporate ministry, so you essentially had Undertaker and the Acolytes, for example, three tough guys, three very tough guys. And then you got the Mean Street Posse. It was just so stupid. Really and truly, if you break the whole corporate ministry down, the only people who had any credibility in the whole faction was Undertaker, Triple H, the Acolytes, Paul Bearer, China, and Vince and Shane McMahon. The rest of the corporate ministry, probably not as much credibility as those guys that I mentioned. But, you know, the entire corporate ministry from the beginning was doomed and it was a complete disaster. Don't get me wrong, we got some pretty cool moments out of this whole mess, but overall, it was crap. It really was. And you look at the whole corporate ministry run from April to July, and they were disbanded in August. Altogether, that whole group lasted a total of nearly 3 months, which doesn't really say much. The ministry, on the other hand, lasted 4 months. The ministry was much better. But the corporate ministry, as I said, only lasted 3 months. Not really good, is it? But as I said, the corporate ministry was just formed to feud with Stone Cold. That was it. Yes, they did feud with Rock, but it was mainly about Stone Cold. And there was just nothing good about this. The only two good things that came out of the entire corporate ministry mess was Undertaker winning the WWF title and Triple H becoming the Game. That's it. That was the only two real good things that came out of this whole thing. The rest, not so much. There was nothing else good that came out of this. So, in terms of the success and failures of the corporate ministry, I'm just going to go out and say it anyway. This was a complete failure from the start. It just made no sense putting both groups together, then having Vince McMahon as the mastermind behind the whole thing when Undertaker should have been the guy who was the brains of the whole thing. He was the ultimate evil. And for him to just basically get pushed aside and have Vince McMahon in that position was just stupid. And as I said, apart from a few good moments that came out of this, other than that, I did not like the corporate ministry one bit. And I find it very interesting, even to this day, they don't ever talk about the corporate ministry. Yes, Undertaker has said how much he disliked it and he considers it to be a low point, but even when The Undertaker was still active, they never ever referenced the corporate ministry once. I think Michael Cole may have mentioned it very briefly once back on Raw back in 2010 when Undertaker was set to face Bret Hart before Wade Barrett came out. I think that was the only time they ever mentioned the corporate ministry. And another thing as well, they have never ever referenced that Vince McMahon and The Undertaker once worked together. Not that it really matters. We don't need to know, but I just find it very interesting they've never ever referenced it. There's not really much to say. There really isn't. But yeah, I'm afraid the corporate ministry just wasn't good. I know there's some people out there that would say, oh, the corporate ministry was peak Undertaker. No, it wasn't peak Undertaker. It was far from peak Undertaker. This is coming from an Undertaker fan. I didn't like the corporate ministry. He definitely didn't like it. And I know for a fact a lot of people did not like it because it just made no sense. Just didn't like it. Not one bit. And I'm not surprised that it didn't last long. I mean, 3 months, I'm quite surprised it lasted that long. I thought maybe it would have lasted just under a month. But what can you do? But yeah, this wasn't one of the company's biggest success stories. This was one of the worst. But yeah, nothing good came out of this whatsoever. And then once Undertaker went to the biker, yeah, all corporate ministry references were just gone, dropped, done, finished. I don't even think they ever mentioned that Triple H and Undertaker were once on the same side. There's nothing really to say about that. So anyway, that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on the corporate ministry? Did you enjoy it? Do you think the corporate ministry was a success or a failure? What was your favourite moments from the corporate ministry's run? Was it when Undertaker won the WWF title or when Triple H became the game? What was your thoughts on the whole ministry and corporation merging? Do you think that was a good move or do you think it was stupid? And what was your thoughts on Vince McMahon being revealed as the higher power and the mastermind of the whole corporate ministry? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.